For so many of us, 2021 and 2020 have been a year of making best with what we have. Our marketing team, for instance, they really wanted a great host. They got an older, fatter version of Colin Jost. And for that reason, we're really happy for you as we work on our own processes to get these things into place. Thank you for putting up with the technical issues, the different funny things you're going to be seeing. I will bet you $5 that this screen behind me drops at some point. But that's part of the fun, right? And that's what we're all here doing today. Ladies and gentlemen, the folks that I've worked with in the utility sector, we know how to improvise. We know how to get out there and get the job done. And that's why this next panel is so exciting. So joining us and coming up next is going to be our Director of Utility Solutions, Brett Simon, and who's going to be sharing with us some of the current trends in the utility sector. Brett, how you doing this morning?
Pretty good, pretty good. How about yourself, Nate?
I'm doing pretty good. Good. I think my hair's a little bit grayer after the last 5 minutes, but you know what? Like, that's okay. It's good.
I'm waiting for my heating system to fall off the wall or something. That's the way the year's going. So.
Well, with that, Brett, I'm going to put the audience in your very good hands, and let's get going.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope everyone had a great break, grabbing some coffee, or trying to stem the tide of never-ending emails. In the spirit of changing how we work, did someone say no more email? I would love that if that's true, but it seems that that's never the case. We're going to spend the next 2 days talking about digital transformation at public utility companies and other spatial type industries that require real world data at field users, back offices, fingertips. However, before we can talk about where we're going, we wanted to step back and talk about how utilities have evolved to overcome past challenges, where they're today, and 5 years from now, where they hope to end up. So as Unearth Director of Utility Solutions, I have the pleasure of welcoming 3 panelists from a variety of public utilities spanning the country. As the panel moderator, I'll be guiding us through this process. I'll start with asking our panelists some questions regarding their past experiences and observations about industry trends. Then we want to allow some time for you all to ask any questions that you might have. Throughout the panel, please submit your questions using the questions panel on the right side of your screen on the GoToWebinar toolbar. As time permits, we'll try to answer every single question that we receive, but let's get right into it. Let me introduce our 3 panelists who will be joining us today. First off, we have David Wassen, a Senior Manager of Region Operations from Entergy. David, can you give a quick introduction?
Hey, good morning, Brett. Thanks for having me on. Hey, good morning. My name is David Wassen. I am with Entergy. I work in distribution operations. At Entergy, we serve right at 2.9 million customers in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. So that's where we're located. We have a little over 13,000 employees. I've been with Entergy for 14 years. Started my career in engineering, went into safety, spent some time in operations, grid modernization, and then now I'm the Senior Manager of Region Distribution Operations in Arkansas. Thanks for having me on, Brett.
Thanks, David. Second up, we have Russell Schultz, training instructor of fossil generation from Arizona Public Service. Russ, do you want to give us a quick intro?
Morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here this morning. I've been in the utility industry for the last 30 years. I've spent time in electrical maintenance, work management, and training our maintenance and operations folks in fossil generation. I live in the Phoenix area. I've been with Arizona Public Service for about 19 years now. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Russ. And last but not least, Roger. Roger's a cross-board program leader from NIPSCO. Roger, you want to wow us with your final intro?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. It's afternoon here in the lovely city of Fort Wayne, Indiana. I work for NIPSCO is the acronym. It's Northern Indiana Public Service Company. And as I said, I live in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is about 2 hours north of our capital city of Indianapolis. NIPSCO serves about 1.3 million gas and electric customers. We are a distribution gas and electric organization. Over 30 plus counties here in northern Indiana. Been with the company for approximately 24 years in multiple roles. In our labor union is where I started out, multiple roles in management. on both gas and the electric side. And currently I am over, as Brett stated, over the cross-bore program for NIPSCO for the state, for our service territory from Ohio to Illinois and north of Indianapolis. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks to you three for taking your time out of your day. I know, luckily, knock on wood, no storms have come through the US, at least as far as I know, at least in your service territory. So let's get started. It's about 9:45 Pacific time. I won't try to do math for all the other time zones. I'll stumble into myself. But we're looking to do about 35 minutes of questions that I'll be asking the three of you. And then as I'm kind of monitoring the audience questions, we'll save some time for the end, and we'll see. I may throw in a question here or there if it's relevant to kind of the topic we're going to be discussing. So to kind of kick it off, I'll start with you, David. With Entergy being in the Southeast service territory, as you mentioned, in New Orleans is kind of its big headquarters. It's been about 15 years since Hurricane Katrina, which we all know and were devastated by in one way or another. How has the storm response activities evolved since that horrific tragedy? And what challenges are still faced when trying to coordinate storm restoration activities?
Yeah, Brett, thanks for asking that. You know, Hurricane Katrina was a horrific event. I spent about 2 years in the New Orleans area, and when I was talking with locals who were around, when Katrina hit, you often heard them refer to life before Katrina and life after Katrina. So it was a very historic event that really left a mark on that community. And, as a company, we learned so much from that event, and we continue to learn. And we're thankful that we are continuing to keep progressing and keep developing in our storm restoration activities. In fact, we received 5 emergency response awards from the Edison Electric Institute. And so we keep progressing in different ways. One thing that remains the same for us is that we do assess damage and we restore electricity, right? So that happens no matter what storm we have, that remains the same. Where we have seen that change in the technology we use and some of the structure we have in place. For example, one of the things that we do now is that we have storm drills on a system level. We have individuals from Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas that come together and drill on a structure that FEMA has in place called ICS, Incident Command System. And so we've adapted that structure to Entergy. And so we drill on that through all 4 states, but we also scale that to do that just in like Arkansas, and then also in the local offices that make up in the state. And so that's really been helpful. We also use technology and different analytics. And so for like in a storm like Katrina, where there's massive flooding, it's not safe to go in a certain area. We now have drones and drone pilots that will help assess those areas. And so that's something we've seen a little bit different. We have updated mapping through LIDAR and conflation. And so we see like updated maps that are integrated our system. We now know the facilities that are likely sitting in the damaged areas, if there's any special needs, and what that might look like even before we're able to put boots on the ground in that area. Another really important part to us is like a resource, it's a resource database. So when we have a big event like a Katrina or this year like Zeta, a lot of resources come in to come assist us in restoration work. With Zeta, we had around 8,000 people from 23 different states come to help us with restoration. That took over 330 hotels. And so you can imagine trying to coordinate an event like that in the middle of COVID-19 when there are other communities that need places to stay. That was challenging and it was very tough. However, the databases that we have in place that help track all of that really help with logistics coordination. And I will tell you, that's a change that no matter the storm, if the storm's flooding or if the storm is just major wind, logistics is something that we have to have in place and we have to be prepared for and take steps on the front end to make sure that it's in place so our resources can get there a little bit earlier than it would if we were not prepared. Because that really is what the restoration time hinges on, right? We have resources that are safely in place, that are ready to work, that we hinge on that right there. So there's a challenge for us. I would say that we continue to improve in that. We continue to learn from it. Our restoration awards are proof of that, but it's definitely something that we work through and that is different for every storm, Brett.
Awesome. I mean, my big question there is if I was to respond to storm response, would I get to choose the Ritz-Carlton as my preferred hotel, David?
Yes, that would be nice, wouldn't it? No, I don't think so, Brett.
No? Okay, just whatever's out in the middle of Arkansas, I'm assuming choices are slim sometimes. So no,
They
thank
are
you,
slim.
David.
Yeah.
Russ, let's move on to you. I mean, as you said, you're in the fossil generation space right now within Arizona Public Service, but I mean, you have a wide breadth of experience. From a generation perspective, how have you seen generation capabilities shift over the years at APS? And do you think, I mean, coal and natural gas are really the bedrock of the base load for most power companies across the U.S. Do you think they'll continue to have a place in our generating landscape?
You know, Arizona Public Service has tried to maintain a really diverse portfolio as far as generation's concerned. We have in the past relied on a nuclear power plant that we operate, Palo Verde, located just west of Phoenix. We've had a decent coal generation portfolio, as well as natural gas and liquid fuel or oil burning facilities. Given, the regulations, the environmental concerns, we have all but eliminated our liquid fuel burning capability. We have a few combustion turbines that will only use liquid fuel, and they're only used for emergencies now. Most folks are aware the landscape for coal isn't really looking all that good right now. Our Troya power plant in northern Arizona is due to be decommissioned by 2025. And our big coal units at Four Corners in northwestern New Mexico are due to be decommissioned in 2031. And, within 10 years, we're going to be completely out of the coal generation business. We do still have a big fleet, a couple thousand megawatts of natural gas burning generation. Some of the older gas burning steam units are being decommissioned as they reach the end of their lives, and we've been increasing our portfolio of aeroderivative gas turbine generators. Recently, we put up 500 megawatts with some new LMS 100s, pretty astounding machines. But APS is committed to be all clean by 2050, which is a huge, huge leap. We have, over the course of the last 2 decades, increased our solar portfolio. We have residential and distributed solar generation. We have solar fields. And, given the disparity between when solar's best generated and when we need power, we're exploring battery storage so that we can meet our load curve there. So, I guess the big takeaway is we're going clean. We've made commitments that the world does not have the technology to meet yet, but it doesn't change that commitment. I look forward to it, although, the whole plan's going to last a little bit longer than I will.
Oh, Russ, you sell yourself short, but no, I thank you for that. I thank you for that answer, and it's definitely fascinating to see the trajectory, even in my, limited tenure space within the utility industry, on seeing the generations, and yeah, I actually visited Four Corners up there in northern Arizona, and it's definitely fascinating to see how it's going to change. Okay, Roger. From a cross-border gas standpoint, what would you say is the biggest challenge you face in managing inspection records and ensuring that compliance requirements are met?
Sure. Well, I want to start off by saying this NIPSCO, my organization, we put this program in place in 2018 above and beyond any mandate. So this isn't a mandated program, and what the program entails is we realized the risk of unintentional cross borers being made over decades that we really weren't aware of. So in 2018, we implemented a program for the safety of our communities, employees, and areas that we work, and we started sewer cammering the sanitary and storm main lines, looking for unintentional cross borers. So Of course, in today's world, 2018, 2019 was, collecting and managing the records was a little ancient, if you will, compared to what we have today. But one of the most obvious challenges in today's world, speaking of last year, is the customer interaction due to COVID, of course, and access to getting those records. If our two methods, our preferred methods, lateral launch from the main to get sewer laterals, if we can't do that, we observe exterior cleanouts, to push camera out. If that's not available, we have to interact with our customers. So one of the biggest challenges right now is that interaction with the customers to get that data, to manage that record. So because for me, I believe, and as an organization, that the personal interaction, we are a public service company, is just vital with the customers. But we also have to be sure, that our crews and customers remain as safe as they can during these uncertain times. So that's one challenge. But I will go on to say, right now, pre-Unearth, it was very challenging to manage all of these records because we didn't have a one-stop shop repository for, let's say, the sanitary and storm main lines that we're inspecting, video storage, our gas line assets, looking up customers in areas. Each one is from a different piece, a different software or different access point. And right now, in today's world, with Unearth, we have utilized Unearth software started last year and into this year, and having the multiple platforms in one space, it has completely changed the game. So right now, we're sitting in a good place, but the previous challenges were as I stated.
Thanks, Roger. No, I mean, especially from a customer standpoint, I definitely see that fundamental shift where it's less the open my bill monthly and pay it, and be much more interacting on, hey, the power's out. What's the ETA? Who's that in front of my driveway right now? And getting that responsive information is more critical than ever. And I think there's the technology available, but not always readily deployed to kind of meet those customer demands. Awesome. Well, David, back to you. How do you balance the priority of collecting the right data in the field, so keeping data integrity, with maintaining your commitments to your customers, speaking of customers?
Yeah, speaking of customers. Yeah, Brett, that's a great question. I really appreciate you asking that. Gathering data for Entergy has been something that's been important for quite some time. For us, we map where our meters are located, and we map that back to, let's say, like a transformer, the first upstream device. That's important for many reasons that we have. One, outage detection. And so, and that has been something we've been doing for quite some time. This helps us be able to know where an outage is and how big the outage, how big the outage area might be. So if there are multiple meters that are impacted across multiple transformers, we know to go to an upstream device. This is that sort of data integrity is not new to us. It's something we've been doing for quite some time. However, when we were implementing some of the grid modernization efforts, one of the things that we recognize is that, yes, data integrity has been important, but it'd be very important in the future with the new technology that we're implementing. And so therefore, we categorize it actually as a critical behavior of ours. Whether you're a management or field employee, data integrity is just a critical behavior. And here's why. The way that we used to do that, capture information on assets, was through paper. If I were going to install a meter, or if I were going to install a pole or a transformer, I would capture that on a piece of paper. And as you can imagine, in the environment where we work, capturing that kind of information on a piece of paper will transpose numbers. It will rain on it. It will get blown away. It'll get thrown away in the trash, lost in the truck. And so you can imagine the data errors that we would have with something like that. What we have now is a tablet that we receive our work on. And so we used intuitive tools like a tablet to also capture our data on. So when we go out and set that meter or install a transformer or a pole, we have a tablet that we're doing our work on. We also then can capture the GPS coordinate for the asset that we're installing. We can also take a picture of the asset if we need to. We can scan a barcode to make sure we have the correct information. And so we have an intuitive tool in the hands of our employees using intuitive processes. And so that keeps us from competing with cost and competing with customer service, because it's an intuitive tool and intuitive process.
No, that's great, especially when you're able to not have to expense one activity for the other, and really it's a win-win. So that's great to hear. Thanks, David. Russ, so kind of switching gears a little bit from a knowledge standpoint, there's definitely, some would say sometimes a generational gap, I think is definitely valid in a variety of situations, regardless of what you're talking about. But there is this empirical evidence that there's kind of an exodus or retirement, a mass retirement of employees and knowledge from utilities. I mean, first off, do you kind of concur with that? And second, how do you see utilities best holding on to that, for lack of a better term, tribal knowledge?
Yeah, I certainly agree that we're experiencing an exodus, maybe more than what would be normal, because people retire and have been retiring for a long time. But, you know, it does seem that the utility industry has and continues to rely on what I hope no one minds me calling the baby boomer generation. And baby boomers are getting ready to retire. The utility companies have been trying to be more efficient and not hiring when they don't need to, and it causes a concern. Now, granted, our technology changes, and a lot of the knowledge that's leaving is obsolete knowledge as well. So, you know, in addition to keeping your people trained and up to date with modern technology, we've also taken the approach of bringing in new people, bringing in younger people. We have a fairly robust apprenticeship program for a few skilled trades inside of our maintenance departments. Our operations folk are completely trained in-house, and we can take in entry-level folks just out of high school and train them clean into leadership positions in power plants from an operational point of view. One of the more exciting things I've seen for maintenance and technical work is partnering with local educational institutions for, say, career and technical education. We're not the only industry in this position. And we've found, at least in our area, that the public education sector is interested in providing training for youngsters who are interested in a technical career or a trade career, rather than going on to higher education such as college. So that's exciting. You know, we have adjunct instructors from our staff at APS who teach at these. We partner with other industries, say like British Petroleum, at one of our community colleges, and we have an industrial training center partnered with them, and we're basically helping to create our craftsmen of the future along with our apprenticeship committees. It's exciting knowing that it's been a worry for a couple of decades. Everyone said it's going to happen, nobody's going to be able to maintain the power plants, but I don't think that's necessarily true, at least not for us. I think we're really well positioned for the future, and I think from a human resources point of view, I think every utility should be looking at those partnerships for the career and technical education that they might have in their area.
No, and I think sometimes the sky is falling approach causes action, and so then helps mitigate the actual problem. Because I do think I agree, and actually a little fun fact that probably no one cares about, but in 10th grade, which was still in the 2000s, so that shows my youngness, I guess. I actually did a speech on why you shouldn't go to college, and so it's coming true. the technical trades are definitely becoming more and more important. And I think, I mean, a very viable, lucrative opportunity for a lot of students coming up. And I'm glad that APS and all utilities are really embracing that educational priority. Okay, Roger. From a technology standpoint, I know we had talked about some of the, I mean, when you're doing cross-bore inspections, it's a long linear area. You have to deal with a lot of customers, probably a number of exceptions or scenarios. From a technology standpoint, what type of technology do you think would benefit your crews or field the most in cross-bore inspection management?
Excuse me, sure. One of the things I'm real excited about, and I've had, I've dabbled in with a few companies, but AI or artificial intelligence, as a predictive, a predictive software, meaning, some of the things that I've seen with artificial intelligence, they're taking a stab at utilizing AI to predict where past or legacy cross bores have occurred. Of course, utilizing internal data. It would be very beneficial. It's not where it needs to be currently, but right now, I spoke of Unearth earlier. I'm using Unearth now, and that technology, I really believe that they're on the right track. They're ever evolving. It really feels like there's something new all the time that they're evolving to within their technology. But just that, I mean, I can't stress enough how valuable that one-stop shop that Unearth provides us for our cross-bore inspection management records. As far as data entry, from the crews out in the field, the technology that Unearth uses, an operator of a camera can be trained up, I mean, in as little as a day or two at the most, to be able to learn data entry, and data collection is just as easy. And for me, where it becomes very important, as I mentioned earlier, it was so difficult for me to go to multiple databases to find things that I needed, such as service records, mainline records, sewer records. If I wanted to specifically pick out a video that I wanted to see, a 123 Main Street, et cetera, it was very difficult. Right now, with the technology that Unearth has presented me, I can get everything I just mentioned in one location, and it's that easy. I mean, in a matter of seconds, it's right there. So I really think Unearth's got a great product, ever involving with the technology, as they are based, as you know, out of Seattle, Washington. You know what I'm saying? What else can you say about that? But I really feel some AI is coming down the line. From who, I don't know. I mean, there's a few folks I'm working with, but we're in a good place right now and changing the game. So thanks for that question. Very good question.
Hey, no, thank you, Roger. And I mean, whether it's Unearth or I mean, any other technology out there, I mean, it's really just changing from a reactive to a predictive and future-looking model. Exactly. And I'm very much appreciative that you feel that Unearth is going down that right path. Okay, back to you, David. So, and I'm looking at time. Okay, we're doing well on time, so I think we're right on track. So how do you see your team's day-to-day activities and/or priorities changing in the coming years, hopefully not decades, as more technologies are deployed for distribution activities like automated switching, circuit isolation, distributed automation, those types of technologies that may not or reduce the requirement of field crews to go out and actually perform manual tasks?
Yeah, great question. So, Brett, for us, providing safe, affordable, reliable power, those are values that they don't change. No matter what advanced technologies we implement, those values don't change. In fact, when we're considering implementing advanced technologies, we consider safety for the employees and for the customer, affordability for our customers, reliability for our circuits. So those things don't change. Something that I have seen increase, though, since we are moving in this direction, is what I would call change management. And if I were to break that down just a little bit more, one more level, two things within change management, and it's really just good leadership qualities, but it's effective communication and role clarity. So as we are implementing change, I really see a lot more of effective communication and role clarity. And I'd like to give you a quick story, quick example. Not too long ago when I was leading a specialized group in Little Rock, they maintain our central business district. Our downtown district in Little Rock primarily served with underground utilities. We had a specialized group that knew the circuits well. They knew how they were configured. They knew when they needed to switch. They knew maintenance plans. And all that was really a local knowledge. One of the tasks that I was given was to bring that local knowledge to more of a centralized knowledge, to where we could see that at the state level, we could see that as a system level. In my tenure in that position, we achieved that. That wasn't that many years ago. Just last week, I had employees in a training that actually talked about now self-healing networks. So basically, I can have a circuit that experiences a fault. I have switches that automatically go in and isolate where the fault occurred, and then other switches automatically restore the customers that are outside of that isolation zone to be able to, it restores the electricity back to those customers. So that all happens before that local person is ever called. And so if you'll walk with me through that, what's happened in just a few years is we've experienced a change from local knowledge to going centralized to now self-healing networks that automatically switch. And so for an employee, that effective communication is absolutely critical. We have to explain where we were, where we're looking to go, where we are now, and how we're going to get there, right? So that effective communication is absolutely critical. Another part of that is very important for us is role clarity. I knew where I used to fit in. I see where we're headed. How do I fit in now? And then really what's important for them is what's in it for me, right? That's what they want to know. And so what we find ourselves working more and more in change management as we are implementing advanced technology. So although our values don't change, we're still going to provide safe, affordable, reliable power. The way that we do that does look a little bit different through focusing on our employees with engaged leadership and good change management style.
No, I mean, and you hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, regardless of what technology you use, it's really shifts to a change management paradigm where just, I mean, all the way up the chain, you just have to maintain those priorities of safety, reliability, and customer-centric vision. And the technology supports those, and you just need to make sure your organization is following lockstep. So thank you, David.
That.
Russ, what do you believe is the biggest challenge? I mean, we kind of talked about coal and gas a little bit, and I see a couple audience questions coming in that we'll probably address that a little bit later. But what do you believe is the biggest challenge that utility generation operating companies or business units face in the next 10 years, or opportunities?
The challenges, at least from my point of view, I'm a power plant guy. I don't really know a lot about the rest of our business, but compliance with our utility commission and our regulators, federal, state, is going to become, well, it's always been important, but I think as standards evolve, it may be more difficult to do. From a public utility commission point of view, because we're an investor-owned utility, we have to balance the value between our customers, and we have the utility commission acting on their behalf, and our shareholders. We do need to remain a viable corporation. If there's no profit to be made by making and selling electricity, I don't think we'll stay in the business for very long. From a regulatory point of view, mentioned it a little earlier, we're trying to stay on the cutting edge of environmental compliance. If we can go completely clean by 2050, I mean, that's a huge commitment. We are certainly committed to maintaining the environmental compliance of our existing units. As we get more advanced in our technologies, it also turns out that we're becoming more vulnerable to attacks against our facilities. Our reliability becomes a little bit more vulnerable, and for those who are lucky enough to be exposed, we have our regulations from NERC that correspond with our bulk electrical system reliability. our cyber protection and our critical infrastructure protection programs. As our technology improves, so does our vulnerability. You know, we have examples from other utilities and utilities in other countries that show just how vulnerable we are without protection. And these regulations and these standards keep getting tougher and tougher and tougher all the time, as well as adding to it. You know, I don't know if we've completely come to terms with our vulnerability yet, because, you know, the people who want to do harm to our electrical system, they're a fairly inventive bunch, and staying in front of them is going to be a pretty big challenge, I think, for every utility.
No, and I completely agree, Russ. And I mean, a little bit of it is kind of like a whack-a-mole concept, where you just have to focus on one thing, and then, like you said, they're inventive and may find another avenue. But trying to make security, whether it's cyber, physical, et cetera, a priority is definitely at the forefront. And I see it will just become more important as the grid becomes more interconnected and reliable. Okay, I think we're at, we're doing perfectly fine on time, and I see a number of audience questions, so I think we'll be able to get them. But kind of my last moderated question for you, Roger,
Sure.
kind of stemming on or piggybacking off of the Russ's discussion on compliance. From a gas pipeline standpoint, how have you seen regulation changing and evolving over the past 10 to 20 years?
Sure, great question. So what I can say is, you know, generally speaking, and of course, rightfully so, you know, our pipeline regulation, you know, from our state and federal authorities has become more strict and specific. So not only are they are requiring being strict on the information that they request, but they want down to the specifics on what we're doing. So between the early and mid 2000s, PHMSA, you know, Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Association, they enacted mandates around, you know, we do have about 1,500 miles of transmission main and about 15,000 or a little more of distribution main, gas main. But they've enacted mandates on those systems. So, and the mandate revolves around the assessment of each system and the system risks, you know, of course, on all, no matter what our pressure is on our systems, and also requiring progressive implementation of the solutions and continuous improvement. You know, it's continually improving, you know, on the way we approach and mitigate these things that we have to report on. So that's how it's changed. You know, of course, so on the back end of that, the challenges became trying to figure out, you know, putting people in place, you know, since we got more strict, more specific, you know, now we need resources to act on that. Of course, that's what we have done. The challenge was, where are we going to get them? And then, you know, we've got very, very seasoned folks, you know, in charge of all the compliance and regulation that we are under here as a highly regulated utility. So that's where we're at there.
No, I appreciate that that candor, Roger.
Absolutely.
I mean, it definitely has changed quite a bit over the last few years, and I think it will continue to change, and we just have to be proactive in that. So now it's about time to go to the audience for your questions. We want to address as many as possible. If you're directing your question at a particular panelist, please be sure to include their name. As I mentioned earlier, please submit any questions in the GoToWebinar questions section. I mean, we've already seen a bunch of them come through, so I think the messaging has gotten across, but please continue to add any if you want, and we'll see how many we can get to before we finish up this event at about 10:40. Okay, let's start. Okay, for David, what types of technology did you use to coordinate storm response?
Yeah, we're actually in a technology shift right now. And so you'll see you'll see technology sort of, like I mentioned a while ago, the resource database. And so we use, one right now is ROD, Resources on Demand. We've used that for several years. I'm not sure where we are from a technology side, if we're looking at additional technology in that perspective or not. But just to be able to manage resources is one part of that. Another one is to be able to manage work, right? So we have work that's associated with recovery. And so we have new workforce management tools that we have just implemented to help us manage that work. We also have a new outage management tool, which is separate from a work management tool. In the past, we had that as one. And when you're trying to use one tool to do both, it didn't always work just right. And so now we have a dedicated tool for work management. We have a dedicated tool for outage management. And then we combine those together, those integrate, those talk. And so that's been really helpful for us. And then we also, those are really more programs. And then hardware, something that we're seeing now is we're using more tablets in the field. In the past, you would see us from a frontline perspective walk out of the office with maybe a circuit map or a piece of paper that tells me where to go. Now that's all at my fingertips. Right. So in the past, walking out of a piece of paper, when I complete that, I would either have to go back to the office or be able to call in and try to understand where somebody's telling me to go next. Now it's all sent back digitally, and then it comes to me digitally. So that's another big technology shift that we've seen in our industry.
Thanks, David. Hopefully that answers whoever sent that question. I think it personally did. It was a great answer. Russ, does APS have programs in place to target students at trade schools? Has this been effective in getting entry-level employees that are ready to be operator qualified from day one instead of having to spend time training the employee for qualification?
Our relationship with, say, our local trade schools like Westmac or up at our San Juan College have been more geared towards maintenance and technical folks. Having a background in operations from, say, a junior college or a trade school would certainly be helpful or advantageous for a youngster. But our power plants in age span an entire generation. And I don't believe that anyone could develop a curriculum that would qualify anyone to walk into any one of our plants ready to go. There's certainly opportunities, but I don't think there's a possibility of training everyone to know everything about each one of our plants. It's just such a wide variety of technologies and age and configuration. We have very little similarity between a lot of our plants, and I don't know that that'll ever be feasible. But partnering with local educators to get people ready is certainly something that we're interested in. It's just, getting someone ready to rock and roll. That tends to take a couple of years once they actually start at the plant.
No, that's great. And I think it'll just become more important to emphasize those trade schools, and I'm glad that APS is going all in. Roger, question came in, how has the last year of the pandemic impacted the rate at which inspections are being completed? I know you mentioned that interacting with customers has been challenging.
It has. That is an absolute great question as well. Thank you for the question. It has impacted the rate of inspection slightly, but not as much as one might think. So during the pandemic, when the pandemic started, around here, probably countrywide, was in March. My camera crews were able to still perform their work as they are only two-man crews, and they were very, very conscious with COVID-19 protocols internally for NIPSCO and as well as their own, organization that they work for. But one of the only thing that it affected was, as I stated before, I put the restriction on all crew members to basically eliminate customer contact if they needed to go into the home. That did not happen after March of 2020, and that's still an actual protocol today. Is I want the crews to get they're getting just as much as they can as far as production on the main lines and any lateral launches that they can get for sewer laterals and any outside cleanouts that they do see. But right now, due to COVID, the restriction is no knocking on doors to gain access internal to do a push cam. Very little, if you want a number to it, the production rate went down maybe between 5 and 8%. That's it. It wasn't a lot, just due to, because what they did was the crews in the field, what they did was took extra measures to try to get that sewer lateral and inspected, knowing that they couldn't get it from the inside. So it opened up other avenues for them to try and get that sewer lateral. So thank you for the questions.
No, and I mean, COVID has definitely encouraged us to think creatively in a number of ways for any situation. So
Absolutely.
no, thank you, Roger.
Yeah,
David,
absolutely.
Was it difficult to have your crews adopt new tools in the field? How did Entergy overcome that challenge? And I'm going to add another kicker. Does it vary by your regions, like Arkansas versus New Orleans?
Yeah, no, very good question. You know, I don't know that it's difficult. A lot of the technology that we tried to implement was very intuitive, right? So we used tablets that they were used to before we went to a new work management software, and so they were accustomed to those tablets. Sometimes we, for some of the, I guess some different other groups, we transitioned to another tablet that runs off of like iOS, something that they're familiar with if they're sitting at their house. So it feels somewhat familiar. That was helpful to be able to use that. What I think the change has been is not necessarily from a hardware side, but a software. We were so accustomed to using something, and now we have changed. As that change has been, quite honestly, been a challenge for us. We're still, I would say, working through that change. One of the things that we've had to realize is that, before we've been using some of the other technologies so long that you had subject matter experts, right? So you had people that you knew in the industry that were go-to, that had answered these questions, maybe helped develop it. Now it's new enough that we are all trying to become subject matter experts. So there's not necessarily just one person that you can contact that knows the answers. We're learning that. So that's a new muscle that we're trying to actually work of. Instead of just going out to go ask somebody else, we're seeking to find and sometimes develop the solutions for the answers that we're asking. So hope that helps answer that question.
No, it's great. We actually had another one, and you may feel free not to answer it, but because it might get too specific. But what software are you using for DMS automated fault isolation? You asked came from our audience members. If you're able to share that?
Yeah, I would have to refer to another group to get down to the very specific software. I do apologize for that.
No worries, no worries. Russ, what are some of the biggest challenges coming up with going clean?
Deciding how you're going to react to our our compliance environment. God, that sounds horrible. Knowing how you're going to deal with the changes, figuring out how to move forward, I think has presented a big challenge, and it will in the future. When you take a look at the emissions controls that are being imposed on coal generation, we had a couple of choices in front of us with our two coal plants. At our Cholla coal plant, they looked at the rest of the available life of the power plant, the cost of upgrading or adding emissions controls, the size of the units, whether it's going to be profitable, whether it's going to be reasonable to do something with those units. And the company decided that they were going to retire those units in their entirety by 2025. Four Corners, on the other hand, was a slightly different situation. The 2 units that are left at Four Corners were built in the early 70s, so they're not quite so old as power plants can be. In the 80s, they had already installed bag houses to reduce particulate emissions. They installed sulfate scrubbers to reduce the sulfate emissions, to deal with acid rain concerns. And then a few years ago, looking at this and looking at nitrogen oxide or NOx limits that they were going to face, they decided on those last 2 units to invest millions of dollars in putting selective catalytic reductors on those units. And they did it, but they're still only going to operate those until 2031. So, you look at a $10 million investment per unit for 10 more years of operation. I mean, the folks who figured out which way to go on that, they understand the finances a lot more than I do. But I think that's where having visionary leadership and, sound financial advice really comes in, is knowing what are we going to do. You can't just stay still, and doing the wrong thing could certainly be costly.
Yeah, you make a very good point there. I mean, you can't just, much to my learning over the years, you can't just turn on and off a power plant and then say, you know what, it's going to be natural gas and it's going to be cold tomorrow. And then, oh, wait, no, I want it to be natural gas. And then, oh, wait, we're going to put a wind turbine on it. It's not that easy. And so you have to make these very strategic decisions. And I mean, although I graduated with a finance degree, I do not envy the finance folks who are constantly evaluating those decisions across the utility industry, because it is definitely dependent a bit on regulations as well. So this is kind of for any of you who'd like to answer, because it's fairly relevant. In terms of adopting new technology, I mean, it sounds like almost every one of you has been venturing down that path in some way or another. But kind of looking back at the paper aspect and utilizing paper, is there still a heavy reliance on paper in the field, whether that's as a result of they just haven't decided to change yet, David, your change management piece, or that there's still certain pieces that require paper? And feel free to anyone jump in and chime in on that.
Hey guys, this is Roger. For the utility company in which I work, we still have, we are doing the electronic transformation to make everything available on the computer, because we use MDTs, tablets, et cetera, as well for our field guys, in the field for our plant workers. But there is a few instances where we still have to use that piece of paper, but it's getting few and far between now. So the answer to the question is we do have both currently, but pushing, of course, toward more of the electronic piece. So that's where we're at. It was a good question.
Cool. David, Russ, anything to add, or did Roger nail it?
From at least a fossil generation point of view for us, I think you have to have two things coincide. Having a device that's both functional and robust. I've been a maintenance hand and I've broken a few things in my day, but having something functional and robust, along with the impetus to integrate that technology into your current management systems. You take our CMMS, Maximo. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we were in the middle of a project where we had the impetus to integrate technology into our CMMS, but all we had at the time was some pretty awful handheld devices. I mean, I had to test those things. It was rotten, as you might recall. Then, you start looking at iPads and other robust tablets that are up to the task. You can go out and buy them. You could spend $500,000 on each employee and buy them, but then you have to integrate them. And as it happens, we're in another cycle where we're trying to optimize our business, and we're doing another round of integration. So as of 2021, we have state-of-the-art mobile technology. We have fairly robust and reliable devices, and we're revising our platform to integrate it. And, having all three of those come together at the same time, I think is really helpful. Having someone come up with a good idea, a new gadget, is great, but you got to bring in all of your shareholders at the same time. Nobody out there is an island, as much as you might like to believe it. You do have to talk to IT. You do have to talk with your management. You do have to talk with your other business partners. And you really do need to implement a solution that suits everybody.
Russ, that was a very eloquent answer, and I definitely appreciate it. David, anything to follow up with that?
I think the only thing that I would follow up with is that I can agree with where Roger started with. At some point, you do both. I mean, in the business that we're in utilities, that there's some information that I just can't afford to be lost as we're trying to learn to do technology, right? So it's not necessarily, when we transition over, it's not always just seamless. There's some trial, there's some errors. We do go through extensive testing. That I'm glad we do that. There's still errors that we find outside of that. So on some of those critical pieces, we absolutely still have a piece of paper that we're tracking on. What I have seen is that as we become, I guess, more proficient in our use of the new technology, we're backing off the paper, and it's good to see that. And part of it is also that culture shift of just trusting that the data is there. A lot of times the data goes, we're just not so sure it's there, so we keep a paper log. As we learn to change, we're beginning to trust the data.
Yeah, trust is half the battle in that standpoint. And I mean, paper backups, I can guarantee any digital transformation still for the foreseeable future will still have those file cabinets full of paper records for the just in case scenarios, because you never know. I have one more question for you, Russ, and then I'll end with kind of a final question for all of you, and then we'll get going. But Russ, a question came in around COVID again. Specifically, it's a little detailed around plant outages, but has there been any unique challenges brought about by COVID with the fact that a lot of employees are remote? I mean, you're sitting at home right now, obviously, but in terms of outage and turnaround for those planned outages, how does APS handle those? And is there any unique challenges that have been found for that?
When the pandemic really smacked us in the face last year, we were still in the middle of our spring outage or overhaul season, knowing that they were going to have to mobilize a lot of people in, and both with our own employees. I mean, our own power plant employees are still on a mandatory weekly testing regimen. Somebody tests positive, they do a review of who they were exposed to, and the people they were exposed to go into quarantine for 10 to 14 days. Some of our outages require a fairly large support presence as far as contract personnel, and getting those folks tested before they come in, again, informal contact tracing. We had contingencies in place where if we had to sequester the plant operating staff, we could. We were looking at trailers, portable sanitation facilities, portable laundry, and basically taking operating crews and sequestering them at the plant, one or two crews to cover night and day, and then asking the folks who weren't on shift to basically isolate themselves at home. Luckily, it didn't come to that, but to this day, we do still have people coming up sick, as you might well imagine. Every facility in our fossil generation has a pre-screening process. Used to be you show up and they stick an infrared gun to your head and ask you a couple of questions. Now we've kind of migrated to an app on our cell phones, and we have to basically do a pre-screening on a cell phone before we key card into a facility, or our management gets a nasty gram. So, you know, we will probably remain working from home. Admin, you know, basically useless corporate puke such as myself, are going to stay at home likely until numbers are really under control. You know, they're looking at vaccine distribution, and strangely enough, I ended up in group 1B, so they'll probably send me back to a plant or something once I'm vaccinated. But it's they've been cautious. You know, we were looking forward to coming back at the end of 2020. I imagine a lot of folks were, but I feel real stupid about it personally. But, you know, come October, November, they announced, you know, you're going to work from home indefinitely until we tell you different. And, you know, I think we're settled for the long haul, and, you know, really need to make certain we don't start, you know, a mini pandemic in a power plant. You know, like I said, these power plants are each unique. And if we wiped out the staff at West Phoenix Power Plant, that's 1,000 megawatts gone. You're not going to bring in anyone from the streets. You're not going to bring in anyone from another plant that's going to know how to operate that power plant. So they need to be really cautious, but, you know, they also need to stay running. I mean, you know, West Phoenix Power Plant in one control room or another has been continuously manned 24/7 since 1920. So we got about 101 years of continuously manning at that place, and COVID didn't change that at all.
That is a great track record, Russ, and a great way to kind of end this Q&A session. As we sort of wind down the panel, and I know we're going a little bit over, and I got the A-OK that we can go about 5 minutes since we had a little bit of a longer break before. So I'll just kind of finish with each of you just kind of giving a quick takeaway of the attendees who are here for these 2 days. I mean, the theme is digital transformation. I know there's a number of utilities out there, especially if they're smaller, maybe haven't yet gone through that journey, and to varying degrees are using paper, non-paper, maybe fairly archaic mobile devices, et cetera. So kind of from a takeaway, what's kind of from a digital field mobility standpoint, what's kind of your one takeaway for the audience today? David, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I would say a takeaway would be, you know, remember your company's values when you're developing and implementing technology. Technology will change, processes will no doubt improve, but your values, however, they're going to remain the same. So just remember those as you continue forward.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And Russ, how about you? Any words of wisdom?
No, it might not be popular, but it does go along with the values of your company. One of the worst things that I've seen for new technology is you go out and buy it, and then you have a solution in search of a problem. I think you need to be realistic enough to know what your problems are, and look for a technology that addresses your problems rather than looking for the next whamadine gadget and then try and shoehorn it into your current circumstances. You know, not a certain, what's that, an anti-sales pitch. But I think your circumstances need to elicit the technology you're looking at.
No, and I completely agree. Buying the next shiny thing is never really the smartest move. Even from a personal standpoint, I've run into that sometimes where it sits on a shelf and then I end up donating it 5 years later. So yes, definitely words of wisdom, Russ. And Roger, we'll end with you.
Sure, thank you. First of all, thanks again for having me a part of this panel. It was an honor to be a part of the panel with Dave and Russ. Thank you guys. Digital transformation is here and it's ever evolving, for a takeaway. So what I can say is get used to it in one way or the other, because you will use it. But we're using it today. So always do one of the things that we live by here. Of course, everywhere, safety first, but always do what's right. So you find the right technology, as Russ alluded to, for your issue. See an issue, fix an issue. But it's coming. It's going to ever evolve, and we're here. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. And thanks to David, thanks to Russ, thank you, Roger, for again taking the time out today. I hope all of you learned a lot, and I'm extremely happy with the number of questions we received from the audience. Again, thank you for participating in this panel, and Nate, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Brett. David, Roger, and Russell, thank you so much for your time this morning. One of the things that I thought was really special about the last session was how important trust is in the process of digital transformation. And that was something that has come out routinely through the conversation this morning. And we're going to hear a lot more about this in the coming day.